History is often presented to us as a neat timeline of events, a collection of stories about great leaders and grand achievements. But if you peel back the layers, you'll find a much darker, more complicated reality. There are truths that have been intentionally obscured, facts that were never fully explained, because they reveal an uncomfortable side of our shared past. Today, we're diving into the uncomfortable truths that history class never taught you. Let's start with a field we trust with our lives: medicine. It's hard to imagine a time when visiting a doctor was more likely to harm you than help you. For over 2,000 years, from ancient Greece to the late 19th century, a terrifying practice called bloodletting was a go-to treatment for almost every ailment. Got a fever? Bloodletting. Suffering from pneumonia? Bloodletting. Even mental illness was thought to be curable by draining blood. Doctors believed that illness was caused by an imbalance of the four humors in the body, and removing excess blood would restore that balance. They used lancets, leeches, and scarification tools to open veins, sometimes draining a patient until they fainted. This wasn't a fringe practice. It was mainstream medical science, a deadly tradition that persisted for centuries despite the mountains of evidence that it was killing patients. Now, let's turn to the concept of childhood. Today, we see it as a protected time for learning and play. But for most of human history, that was a luxury few could afford. During the Industrial Revolution, child labor wasn't just common. It was the engine that powered factories and mines. Children as young as 5 were forced into grueling, dangerous jobs, working 12 to 16 hours a day for pennies. They were prized for their small size, able to crawl into tight spaces in textile mills to fix machinery or haul coal through narrow mine shafts. The conditions were horrific. They breathed in toxic fumes and dust, suffered severe injuries from unguarded equipment, and faced brutal discipline from overseers. Many died before reaching adulthood. While we see pictures of smiling children in old-timey photos, the reality for millions was a short, bleak life of exploitation. The fight for child labor laws was a long, bitter struggle against powerful industrialists who saw these children not as people, but as cheap, disposable labor. The aftermath of war is often sanitized, focusing on treaties and reconstruction. But the concept of justice for wartime atrocities is surprisingly modern. Throughout history, countless war crimes went completely unpunished. Think of the brutal campaigns of Genghis Khan, whose armies were said to have slaughtered so many people that it actually cooled the planet by reducing carbon in the atmosphere. Or the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, a centuries-long crime against humanity where millions were kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, with virtually no legal consequences for the perpetrators. Even after World War I, the war to end all wars, the attempts to prosecute war criminals were largely a failure. It wasn't until the Nuremberg trials after World War II that the world established a precedent that leaders could be held accountable for crimes against humanity. But for millennia before that, the rule was simple: might makes right, and victors are not questioned. What did people do for entertainment before television or the internet? For many, it was watching a person die. Public executions were a disturbingly popular form of mass entertainment for centuries. These were not solemn, hidden events. They were massive public spectacles, advertised in advance like a festival. Crowds numbering in the tens of thousands would gather in town squares. Vendors sold food and souvenirs. Parents brought their children, believing it taught a moral lesson about the consequences of crime. From hangings in Tyburn, London, to beheadings by guillotine during the French Revolution, people cheered, jeered, and treated death as a thrilling show. The final words of the condemned were a major attraction, and their bodies were sometimes fought over by medical schools for dissection. This wasn't just about justice. It was a raw, visceral form of social control and a morbidly fascinating community event. We learn about the fall of great empires like Rome, and it's often blamed on barbarian invasions. But that's only half the story. The truth is, many of the world's most powerful empires rotted from the inside out long before any external enemy delivered the final blow. Rampant corruption was the silent killer. In the late Roman Empire, public offices were sold to the highest bidder. Generals used their armies to seize political power, and the tax system was so broken and unfair that it crushed the middle class, leading to widespread poverty and social unrest. Similarly, the Spanish Empire, despite its immense wealth from the Americas, was crippled by systemic corruption, with officials enriching themselves while the state went bankrupt. This pattern repeats throughout history. Internal decay, greed, and a loss of civic virtue hollowed out these superpowers, leaving them as a fragile shell, ready to shatter at the slightest push. The invaders didn't conquer a strong empire, they simply walked over a corpse. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we must confront the fact that history is almost always written by the winners. The narrative we inherit is the one crafted by those who came out on top. When a civilization is conquered, its libraries are often burned, its leaders executed, and its stories silenced. The losing side is systematically erased or demonized. We know of the Roman conquest of Gaul largely from Julius Caesar's own self-serving accounts. The history of indigenous peoples across the Americas, Australia, and Africa was largely ignored or rewritten by their colonizers to justify their own actions. Entire cultures, languages, and perspectives have been lost forever because their voices were extinguished. What we read in history books is not an objective account of the past. It is a curated story, shaped by power, bias, and survival. To truly understand history, we must learn to read between the lines and listen for the voices of the silenced. History is not a clean, heroic saga. It's a messy, complicated, and often brutal story of human nature in all its forms. It's filled with uncomfortable truths that challenge our modern sensibilities. But ignoring them is a disservice to the past and a danger to the future. By confronting these dark chapters, we can better understand how far we've come and how carefully we must guard against the shadows of our own history repeating itself. Thank you for watching. If this made you think, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you were never told. See you next time.